Cool. Well, welcome to Inside the 90. We're excited to dig into this conversation about what it's like to live in a 90-day world of EOS. And super excited today to have Alec Broadfoot and John Vidosh on from VisionSpark. And we've been probably first met about a year ago. Recently got to bump into Alec as he was walking into his session at EOS Worldwide Conference. So very excited to have you both here today.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Excited to be here.
Well, to get started, let's jump right in. Alec, I'm really curious. We haven't talked about this, but what's the origin story for VisionSpark? How did y'all come to be?
Yeah, it was birthed 20 years ago. I was running a mailing and printing company, and we processed mail for all the big companies here in Columbus, Ohio. So JP Morgan Chase and the big hospital systems and a lot of the Fortune 500 companies that are here. And we were we were killing it from an operations standpoint. We pick up the mail from our clients at 2 p.m. and we'd have in the post office by 8 p.m. We had this amazing process. Clients just loved us because we were good and we were fast, and we were growing. We were nominated for Entrepreneurs of the Year by Ernst & Young, and it was going great. Except I didn't have some great people on my team, and I couldn't hire well. And so I met a gentleman who introduced me to an assessment tool, and he's like, "Are you using any sort of assessments in your hiring?" I said, "No." So we started using assessments in our hiring, and it was just an amazing turnaround. Instead of us firing 7 out of 10 people, which we were, we end up keeping 7 out of 10 people. And so I saw the power of the assessments. At the time, we were looking for an executive assistant, and I didn't know how to interview like I do today. So put that aside. And this one woman came in, and she interviewed amazing. And so I had her take the assessment, and the results were horrible. And I'm like, well, they can't be true. They can't be accurate. So I decided to check her references, and good references. Again, I didn't know how to ask good reference questions. And I hired her, and everything the assessment said was going to happen did happen. The assessment said she was going to be a slow learner. She was going to not retain things. She was going to be a social butterfly. She's going to be disorganized, and she would need tons of affirmation. And it also said she was pretty insecure of who she was. And so within 3 weeks, we fired her. And so that was the birth of the seed that was planted for VisionSpark. And I was in a peer group where I saw my entrepreneurial friends making the same hiring mistakes. And so I sold my interest in that business. I started consulting, helping companies improve their cash flow. And I saw that they had tremendous leadership issues, and that they really didn't have cash flow issues. They had the right leaders, they would succeed. And so in 2014, I started VisionSpark to help entrepreneurs hire the right people, especially when it comes to key leaders. And so that's the foundation of what we do now, is that everything it's science-based, whether it's an assessment or structured interviews. And so that's why we have the success we do, because of the science.
Very cool. And so that was I guess a little over a decade ago when you started VisionSpark now, and it's in its current form. What's the size of the agency today?
We are huge. Our global headquarters here in Columbus, Ohio, we have 18 employees right now. So, yeah.
That's awesome. When we talk about EOS, a lot of times you hear the proverbial, hit a ceiling. Now, 10 or 11 years ago, you started VisionSpark. At what point did you discover EOS, and was it at a moment where that was true, or what did that look like when you first heard about EOS?
I mean, that is so true that companies hit ceilings. And I started VisionSpark with a business partner, and we kept on hitting a small revenue ceiling. We could not break through, and he eventually decided he wanted to leave VisionSpark, and I bought him out. And then we grew 20-30% in 1 year. And so there was that part that I broke the ceiling. At that time, we started working with companies running on the EOS in 2015. And we sponsored the EOS conference in 2017. And so at that conference, that's where my business partner and I were having some deep discussions about, who we are, what we wanted to go. We started seeing some differences. So EOS started that friction and that tension. And then through Strategic Coach, I realized that my unique ability was not selling. And so I hired a salesperson, and that started allowing us to scale. And we were self-implementing EOS, and we were failing miserably at that. And so in 2020, we hired an implementer here in Columbus. And that's when things really started to shift. And that's where, that's where my business grew up. I think we were just in adolescent phase up until then.
Wait, who's your implementer today? Or who was that?
Roy Getz is our implementer
Roy Getz,
today.
okay. We'll be sure to give Roy a shout out, Roy.
Rebecca Lockwood was our implementer in 2020, and she did a wonderful job. And, I feel so bad for her because it was dysfunction. We put the fun in dysfunction.
So you said something interesting. You were at the EOS conference when y'all started talking about the business situation. So you were not running on EOS before you started sponsoring the conference?
No, we were self-implementing EOS.
Okay.
Yeah, we were self-implementing, and we've been working with companies running on EOS since 2015, helping them with their integrators, and we saw the success. I mean, we saw clients that were just scaling and growing, and we knew EOS had its value. We were just super small, and we couldn't afford an implementer, and we tried to do it ourselves, and it was not a great experience.
Going back to that self-implementation phase, what were some of the challenges that you had?
There was the cadence of the meetings, the accountability of the to-dos, the rocks changing, not having great rocks. There was a real issue with our identity in who we were as business partners. And we had several discussions of who was the visionary, who was the integrator. I knew I was the visionary, and my business partner, he would fluctuate between visionary and integrator. And so that was a very difficult process. And, after the EOS conference in 2017, it was in Atlanta. And we went out for pizza and walked across the street, sat in an ice cream parlor for 4 hours and just talked all sorts of issues. And that's when I realized that my business partner did not want what I wanted. And, I wanted to help the masses, help tons of entrepreneurial companies hire great leaders. And he really wanted to do deep consulting work for a select few clients. And so that was the beginning of us parting ways, and very amicable, and still like him.
Very cool. And then, so John, tell me about, where did your path cross with Alec?
So my path crossed with Alec probably would have been late 2020, maybe early 2021. And so I was in between career opportunities at that time. And as I was just networking and connecting and, having job interviews, I kept hearing EOS, EOS, EOS. And it's like, what is this EOS that everybody's talking about? And through a mutual friend, I got connected with someone who at that point in time was an EOS implementer. And we went out for coffee, and she talked to me a little bit about it. I said, hey, I'm hearing all this stuff about EOS. My connection, our mutual connection, said, hey, you were an EOS implementer. I'd love to learn more. And so we had many coffee sessions where we talked about EOS. I think in one of the early sessions, she gave me the Traction book. And I'm not a huge book reader, so I'd rather show me the movie, right? Let me listen to book on tape. I'll do that all day long. But she gave me this book. She gave me the book Traction. And I read that book. It's probably the first book that I read cover to cover, didn't kind of fall asleep 10 minutes into it. And I just, as I read it, it's like, integrator. I said, that's what I've been doing for a long time and haven't known what I was. I was an animal without a name almost. And so I went through all of that. And then, so she was friends with Alec at that point. She goes, let me introduce you to somebody who I think you should get to know here in Columbus. And so I reached out to Alec, and they had a lot going on at the business, and he was very respectful. And I think maybe to a certain degree, he thought that I was my sole intent was looking for a job. And yes, I was looking for a job, but I was just networking and trying to grow and make myself known within the Columbus area, and just wanted to learn more about this. And so he kind of said, hey, go check some things out. And probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 months went by. And then I saw him finally post something on LinkedIn that says, I think I'm finally ready to hire my number 2. And it's like, or my integrator. And it's like, integrator, I know what that is. I know I'm one of those. I've already got an initial connection into Alec. And so I reached back out to him and said, hey, Alec, we talked. It's been a while ago, but we talked, and I'd love to learn more about what you're looking for in your integrator. And then just things just went from there. So we had some discussions, and he was interviewing other people. We went through the whole interview process, very thorough interview process, by the way. And so I went through the assessment and the data-driven information and process around picking the right people, picking the right leaders. And I bubbled to the top. And almost 4 years later, here I still am. And this is by far, I'm older in years, as my beard might say. And so I think this may be my final hurrah as I go off into retirement at some point here. But this is by far the best organization that I have ever worked for, the team. And I think it has a lot to do with the principles behind EOS and the passion and right people, right seat, and all of those things. We just embody those things. And Alec had those processes that he was kind of bringing up through fruition, through, self-implementation, and then going with implementers. It's a great organization. I can't say enough about it and what Alec's built here.
Well, so it's interesting because Alec, you're an organization that focuses on hiring integrators. So John, going into this process, was there any intimidation in that, where you're like, all right, this is what they do, and I'm trying to be the one for them?
As I reflect back now, I've never been asked that question, but no, not really, because as I read Traction and as I read the book, it's like I have been doing exactly what it says integrators do for quite some time, for probably at least 15 years in my previous roles and careers. And so I felt very confident that, and I felt I had a good understanding of what Traction and what EOS looked for as the way as integrators. And I felt I could stack up as well as anybody else. Yeah, some of the other parts, and I will tell you, it's a very thorough, rigorous process. By far, the most thorough, the most rigorous process I went through. So from that perspective, yeah, you do sometimes doubt or wonder or question. It's like, hey, how am I going to emerge on the other side of this?
Yeah, I think you mentioned something earlier, starting the conversation about the assessments, Alec. And I'm Colby is one of the EOS tools, and I'm certified in Colby. And I've actually helped people hire, using Colby. But when I hired for myself, I actually went against Colby, and I was like, nope, for me it's different, and it didn't work. I didn't trust the assessment, so I didn't take my own advice and what I had recommended to others. From your perspective, what was it like for you to actually hire your own integrator? Like, what did that process look like? Yeah,
it was a unique process, and it's a testament to EOS and what they believe in. And so I had a very small leadership team when we started EOS, and I was in 3 seats. I was the visionary, the integrator, and over finance. And my 2 leadership team members at the time were really pushing me to get someone over finance. And it had come up in an annual or quarterly, I can't remember. And so I said, okay, in 90 days, I'll make sure I hire someone to oversee finance. And that way I can be a better visionary integrator. And it was at the annual where, it was at the annual, because we ended like at 3 or 4 p.m. and it was off site. And I asked Rebecca, our implementer at the time, I said, can you stick around? And I just really want to talk this through. And I know the need is for someone to oversee finance, but I'm struggling with that because I think that's just a symptom. The real need is I need an integrator. And so we concluded that meeting. And again, we were small at the time. We only had, maybe 5 or 6 people on the team. And I said, okay, we can't afford a full-time, or too small. So I'm going to hire a fractional. And so I interviewed some different fractionals, and I spent a good 90 days interviewing the fractionals, and I just was not happy. The people I was interviewing at the time, the really good ones were charging way too much. The one I wanted had her book of business was way too full. And then I looked at a couple others, and I didn't like the fact that they didn't roll up their sleeves and get work done. They would just give me more to-dos. They were an advisor. And I needed someone that could actually lead the L10s and run the business and hold my leadership accountable, LMA. And so I had this one person in town that was highly recommended to me. I said, you know what? I'm going to have them take our TIP assessment, talent impact profile assessment. If it's mediocre or better, I will hire this individual. And I got the results, and they were lousy. Like I couldn't have. There would not have been a worse person to have as our integrator. And so we have the 7 indispensable traits of integrators. He only had 1 of them. And so like I said, I'm done playing games. I'm going to invest. I'm going to hire a full-time person. And so we put an ad out, and John was one of the candidates, and he succeeded through the entire process. So that's how it came about. And by the time I hired John, we had about 7 or 8 employees who were a little bit bigger. And when he came in, I gave him a list of projects and priorities, and he rolled up his sleeves and got to work.
Very cool. John, what was it like to be doing what you're doing forever, kind of being the closet integrator, and then realize this is me, and now step into an organization that's already running on EOS, and so now you're both the integrator and applying your background expertise. What was it like those first month or 2?
Yeah. So what I always told people that where I felt I excelled is I took good organizations and made them greater, made them better. So I took the basic foundation, and then I think EOS gave me the ability to have some of those tools that they have in their toolbox and really leverage them. So in some regards, it made that a little bit easier, because some of that stuff was, my own trials and tribulations through the time to accomplish that. But being able to step in and know, that the organization already had a good foundation around kind of the concepts around EOS and the tools within that. And so the pump was primed, so to speak. And so it was just a matter of me kind of pushing down on the accelerator and moving forward. So we had some things we had to solve in that first 30, 60, 90 days. We worked through those things. Alec was very patient. We spent a lot of time, in our one-on-ones, getting alignment, making sure we had alignment. One of the things I found so interesting was that just inherently out of the gate, we were so aligned around how we approached things. It was a little scary. It's like we'd talk about it, and I'd listen to him. I say, Alec, how would you want to handle that? And he'd say, well, this is how I would like to see this happen going forward. It's like, that's exactly how I would have done it. Or he might ask me that same question. What do you think we should do? And I'd say, well, I'd probably approach this situation or this solve in this way, A, B, and C. And he goes, yep, that's exactly how I would do it or how I would want it done. So I was fortunate. So I think, what do they say in EOS? There's one integrator for every 10 visionaries or something like that. And so I just felt so lucky and fortunate that he and I were just so aligned in our business approaches, our principles, our core values, and it's made things relatively easy. Now, I'm not saying all the tasks and all the hurdles we've had to overcome are easy, but knowing that he and I were aligned, that we supported each other, and we were pushing forward was great.
What? So you mentioned that y'all were running on EOS when you were smaller, and I think that's a common question, and as EOS would say, hey, 10 to 250 employees, but I started Wonder when just me, and I was like, all right, I've got a VTO, and then we've built the team, and there are inherent complexities and challenges when you're smaller. But I also say start running on EOS as soon as you can. It doesn't matter what size you are. But from your perspective, Alec, when y'all were 5, 6, 7 people, and then you brought John on, like what were some of the challenges that you would say were not EOS challenges and not necessarily Vision Spark challenges, but for the scale? Like you're doing EOS, but you don't have the scale of it yet. So are there any challenges that you think of that you would encourage people to say, like, hey, if this is don't give up on EOS because you're 6 people and it's hard?
Yeah. I think our biggest challenge was we had some legacy employees. And so, I had 2 individuals that were with me 6 and 8 years. So in 2020, so we started Vision Spark in 12. So I had this one individual that was with us 8 years and another that was with 6 years, and they were valuable to the business, but they were not aligned with the vision, with the core values, with rocks, and put what's best for the business, right? That was something that was unique to them. It was always a great idea for me, and I was always trying to please them. How can I make them happy? And my sensitivity, which I think is very common for entrepreneurs, and in our assessment, we measure individuals' empathy and sensitivity. And by nature, we're more empathetic, which makes us great visionaries because we know what the customer wants, but we also, we're often people pleasers. And so we try to make everyone on our team happy. And that was not success. That's a recipe for disaster. So when we started EOS, they had a really hard time with it. The one employee actually resigned within 30 days of us saying we're starting EOS with an implementer. There was some outstanding circumstances. The individual that was with us 8 years, I guess I was been always too tolerant, and I was done with being tolerant, and I said, I want you to go on a leave of absence, and we'll talk when you get back. And essentially, I want to see if she's here's the vision, here are our core values, are you aligned or not? And during her sabbatical, there was it's a long story, and it's a great story, but her husband's company ended up offering her position, and she got to work with her husband's company. So she left. And so then I elevated 2 other people in the leadership position. And then that started momentum. But it is very tough when you have leaders and you have big personalities, and not everyone's aligned. And I know in working with hundreds of companies that run on EOS and other operating systems, when there is a commitment to a certain operating system, you're going to get turnover. And I've heard stats of it's 80% turnover within a year of the leadership team. And I've seen companies, it's 100% turnover, right? So they hire an integrator, and then they, decide that they're going to start LMA, and then the leadership team has a problem with it. So I've seen 100% turnover. I've seen other companies where it's just a couple positions, but I do agree with that number. It's about 80% turnover. So that's the most difficult thing.
And you're talking about turnover specifically on a leadership team.
On the leadership level. Yeah. And then just being committed to it. I think the first 90 days are the hardest with EOS. And that's why you need an implementer, and that's why you need an integrator. And I do recommend to our clients that they hire the integrator first, because it is so much. And you want someone who has that unique ability of being process-oriented and organized, and a coach and LMA to be in place first before you commit to EOS. Because I've seen companies spend a lot of money with implementers and a lot of false starts until they finally realize we need an integrator. And I think they could have saved that money for those EOS implementers if they had a great integrator. They probably could pay for their integrator for what they paid the EOS implementers for too.
Yeah, and I would assume in that too that there's part of as much as the visionary is casting vision and taking ownership and equity aside, that, an integrator is coming in and needs to be aligned in that vision. And if there's some, collaboration in that, doesn't have to be consensus, but if there's collaboration, they're going to have more ownership in it, I would assume. So letting them be involved in that process from the beginning versus getting moving and then dropping someone in and saying, all right, John, this is where we are. We've been doing this for a year. Now I need you to pick it up. I would think that would be hard. John, from your side, on the integrator side, what's your biggest aha, in being in the role now, and I would say being a mature EOS organization?
I would say my biggest aha, this is, in this type of industry, so this was a new industry for me. And so, and I think, but that's one of the things that, being an integrator, and as I mentioned earlier, kind of taking good organizations and taking them to the next level. And I'm more so about, as Alec mentioned, I'm more about, and the integrator's role about processes, procedure, and holding people accountable. So the widget is less critical for me. But it was a bit of an aha. It's like, this is different. I've never done this before. I've never done a retained search, kind of model. That's helping people find the right people for the right seat. And that's what everything's built on. I mean, I've hired a lot of people in my career. As Alec indicates, I've made some good hires and I've made a lot of bad hires too. And so that was an aha moment for me to say, wow, there's companies out here that do this, and this is what they're all about. And not only that, there are this organization here, because very serendipitously, I had also talked with a couple of other recruiting, executive search firms. And as I learned more about them, what was unique here is the tools that they used and the tools that they own. So that was a real aha to me that said, hey, there is more to hiring than just looking at a resume and looking at somebody's past and saying, oh, yeah, they answered the questions well. Their resume says they've got experience doing all of this. Let's move forward. Let's hire them. Because when you hire somebody who's not a good culture fit or a core value fit, that is just as disruptive to an organization as someone who doesn't have what I call the ticket or doesn't have the resume. So they don't have the skills. The resume says they do, but they really don't. And so if they can't come in and perform at whatever job you're asking them or role you're asking them to perform at, that's bad. But also to come in and be toxic or not to be aligned and not have the same core values and drive moving forward, that's just as disruptive. So those were big aha moments for me that this is an organization that focuses on that other piece of who the individual is.
And I think, so I come from a recruiting background for a season of my life, and we met and talked about that. And y'all's approach is I know you've got the people plan, which is one process that you have, but your whole model for recruiting was unique to me. Alec, explain the model a little bit.
Yeah, it all starts with the very first step. We call that the position maximizer step, and it's really critical. We create an accurate portrayal of who this individual is, and we write it in such a way that's going to attract individuals that have the core values and want to work for the company, and we repel individuals that aren't a good fit. And so we get that done super right, and then we have hundreds of high quality candidates that apply, and we will go through each resume, and I say we don't read resumes, but we score resumes, and each resume gets a numeric score. And so then from that evaluation, we invite the top 20% to go through our proprietary management screening interview. So we have 8 questions we ask, and there's answers we're looking for. And if they get 4 of those questions wrong, half wrong, we don't move them forward in the process. It doesn't matter how great a resume they have, if they have industry experience, if they live in the area, they play on the Visionaries softball team. That doesn't matter. And so And then from there, we put them through a 90-minute leadership study interview. And so they get evaluated in 12 areas. And again, it's a structured interview with scripted questions. And we ask them certain questions, and we're expecting certain answers in there. And if they don't score well on that, they don't move forward in the process. Then we have our TIP assessment, the Talent Impact Profile, which is an online assessment, and that measures 6 mental aptitudes and 10 personality dimensions. So the mental aptitudes it measures is mental acuity. So are they a conceptual learner or a hands-on learner? This is a very critical part of the evaluation process, because if you're hiring an integrator that you're wanting for an entrepreneurial company that you want to be innovative and flex and change with the new trends and with AI, and you want them to have really high level critical thinking skills and problem solving skills, you want them to have a high mental acuity. So that's critical. And then we also measure attention to detail, their ability to work with numbers, vocabulary, business terminology, and then we measure their memory retention. So this is a great, if someone scores high in memory retention, we know not only is training going to be a lot easier, but we know that this integrator is going to be a good follower of competitive trends and product trends and industry trends. So those are really important factors. And then they're measured in 10 personality dimensions. And, there are several that are key. And so we want to make sure that they're organized and process oriented and can LMA and make good decisions and be great communicators. They're measured there. And then out of that candidate pool, we'll have the top candidates meet with our client. And so there's probably 2 or 3 candidates that made it all the way through the process. And out of those 2 or 3 candidates, we prepare our clients. So we do an interview day debrief where we go over the clients, we go over their background and their scores and what we like about them. And then we provide them an interview guide. And then we provide them an interview rating form and a schedule for the day. And at the end of the day, they're to rate the candidates. And then from there, our goal is for our client to say, man, I can't decide. These candidates are amazing. And that's our goal. Like, we know we did a good job. Then usually we'll say, hey, your top one, take them to lunch, go a little deeper, something less formal meeting, get to know each other. They'll make an offer. And then the process does not stop once the candidate accepts the job. We help them with onboarding. So what success looks like, what do we want them to accomplish in 30 days, 90 days, 180 days? We have that assessment on that candidate, and we actually do a side-by-side with the hiring manager. So in this case, it would be with the visionary. So we have the visionary take the assessment, we have the integrator's assessment, and then we do a side-by-side. That helps with communication, that helps with productivity, because now that visionary really knows that person's strengths. That's our process. So it's a very thorough process. The candidates say, they've never been through a process like ours, and, having 5 different stages of vetting. But the ones that end up hiring are thankful. They're like, man, this says so much about your client that they would spend so much and hire you that I really want to work here all the more because your process is so thorough.
And so how many, time frame, like if someone comes to you today and says, hey, we need an integrator.
Yeah. And
you get engaged and get through the process, what's that timeline look like?
24 hours, we're done.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's about 90 days.
Okay.
So it's about 90 days from the time we post to about the time the client actually offers the job to the candidate. So we want to make sure, without a doubt, that they don't hire the wrong person. So, the best time to fire a marginal performer is during the interview process, right? So,
very, very true.
So we want to make sure that they hire the right candidate. And so, although we want them, to make an offer and hire the right candidate, we're not going to rush the process so they hire the wrong candidate.
And then on the other side of that, y'all are not, you say you're retained search, right? So you're not contingent. What's it look like after that? Like, what's y'all's guarantee on that position?
Yeah, so we do offer guarantees. So we have two guarantees where we have a guarantee that we will find you somebody. And I didn't know this, Jamie. Maybe you did, but a couple of years ago, I learned that the average placement rate is 60% amongst recruiters. So it's a 10% chance, 10% better chance than flipping a coin that recruiter or search firm is going to find you someone. And I'm like, we're 100%. So we said, hey, why don't we offer a guarantee and give the client ease? And then we have a retention guarantee. And that guarantee is either 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months based on the service. So if they do a full-blown leadership search with us, it's a 12-month guarantee. So if the client fires that individual within 12 months, we redo the search at no charge.
Wow. And so just, stats from my experience is, my personal experience is it took 81 days for us to place someone. We placed about 35% of the positions that we got. And then about a third were placed by the client direct. And then a third never got filled. So that jives with that 60% number too. But the challenge was, people, 81 days seems like forever. And that's your average. I mean, without your process, it's taking 81 days. With your process, it's, the quality of the candidates, the process itself, the engagement from the customer, which I think is a huge part of it, right? But that's 90 days. I mean, that's, and I know that's an average, but that's really impressive. And I do find that specifically in recruiting, I mean, there's a lot of hate for people that don't get hired. And I always try to explain there's only one seat on the airplane. But giving them the steps, letting them understand the commitment, keeping the candidates informed. I assumed it's actually a win-win-win all the way around for the client. The person gets hired, and those in the process as well, which is very, very unique.
Yeah.
So y'all have got, that's y'all's, what do you call that? The people plan?
No, that's not the people plan. That's our leadership search.
That's the leadership search. Talk about the people plan for a minute.
Well, and EOS on your VTO, there's a spot for your 3-year picture, right? And what do you want your revenue to be like? What do you want your profit to be like? What do you want things to look like? We had on our 3-year picture a certain revenue target, certain profit margin. We wanted a premium off the space, health insurance for our employees, super nice vacation perks. So that was on our VTO, but we had no plan to get there. And so what we do on our people plan is that we actually work one-on-one with the visionary, and we go deep with that visionary, and we find out what their superpower is, what do they love to do, what's going to create the biggest impact in the company. We evaluate their current team. Most of the time, they don't have the right people in the right seats on their leadership team. And so because we have that, we actually can, say, hey, Joanne, she probably should move to the customer service manager role, or Bob, he's your controller, but he does not have that attention to detail. And as you grow and scale, that's going to be more and more of an issue. Do you really want to, have many mistakes? And so we have this frank discussion about their individuals on their team. Do they have the core values? Do they want to retain them? And then we talk about what are some benchmarks that would help them scale. So, we had one client in, they were at 20 million. They want to be at 100 million. And with this visionary realized that his unique ability was identifying companies to acquire, working the deal, and that's how they're going to grow. But he needed a really good integrator, and he was the integrator himself. So the first thing we did for him is hire that integrator. He also realized that he had a key member of his team that was with him a long time was in the wrong seat. So we actually recommend that he take the director of operations role we recommended the sales manager role so now this client has a clear path of who they're going to hire, when they're going to hire, and what would be some of the things, the trigger points to help them hire. So when they reach a certain volume, they'll be ready for a full-time CFO. And so it's a 3-year plan, and it's going to help them scale much cleaner, much quicker, with less stress and less heartache.
So the people plan is a service you provide outside of recruiting?
Yes.
So
yes.
so anyone could come to y'all and y'all do that workshop facilitation and build the plan for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what it helps those visionaries. We help them get some clarity around things. So sit down, have some of those tougher discussions, kind of really get them thinking around, okay, who's my team now? Where do I want to go? And are the right people in the right seat, as Alec alluded to? And sometimes what a lot of businesses find is the right person to get you to one level is not the right person to get you to the next level. So having them asking those tough questions, making them really think about that, in this particular instance, gave that visionary some real clarity around, yeah, they got me where I am, but they're not going to get me to 100 million. And I have to get comfortable with that. And it's not like, oh, I just jettison everybody, but how do I reposition, or how do I bring in the right people to now take me to that next level? And it's eye-opening for them once they come out the other end. And we give them a full-blown report at the end that says, hey, based on everything we talked about, based on what you talked about, here's kind of our analysis. Here's what we think next steps might be based on the things we discussed. So they have kind of a working plan when they leave as well.
Yeah, that's our implementer is Andrew Geisel, and he talks about organizations hit ceilings, leadership teams hit ceilings, departments hit ceilings, and people hit ceilings. So when when you find in an organization one of those levels, but it's actually a person that's hit a ceiling, is there coaching, mentorship? Are there things that can help individuals break through those ceilings, or do you usually find that that's someone on the either wrong seat or wrong bus?
Yeah, I with individuals on the team, are they a core value fit? That's number one. And then do they have the capacity, the GWC, the get it factor, the want it factor, and capacity to take that company to the next level, right? And so that's really critical. A friend of mine, a colleague here in Columbus, he has a really good company, and his sales manager, we end up being, I won't give any more details because I don't want to give that away, but his sales manager had, we did an evaluation on her, and she just didn't have the mental aptitudes to take that company to the next level from a revenue standpoint. And so I asked him, I said, can she take you to the next level? He said, no. And he's like, that's exactly what I needed to hear. And so we had clarity around that, moved her out of that role. And he hired a new sales manager, and boom, they just took off. And so you really have to look at that. And then our assessment does a phenomenal job because we measure mental aptitudes at evaluating the get it factor and the capacity. So, they may want it, but how do you know if someone truly understands the job and what success takes? And then do they have the mental capacity to get there? And so we can see that with our assessment.
That is very cool.
And Jamie, to your point as well, and don't tell anybody this because it's not completely ready for prime time, but to your point, are there tools to help somebody get past the ceiling? And so we're kind of behind the scenes, we're working on some tools. We're working on kind of a visionary integrator tool right now for that onboarding to help connect that, but that could be used for other things. And as we look at other roles, we're looking to add some service offerings there, and some additional training, and some just additional ways to maybe be of service for those organizations that might want or need that, or that could be a solution for them. So. But don't tell anybody that yet.
Well, I was going to say, that's an integrator just stepped into a visionary seat, and he's making promises that the integrator's like, no, you can't say anything about that yet. So
no, well, that's Alec's vision. So
yeah. And we're known for building the landing gears as we fly the plane around.
Well, to wrap us up here, I think this has been really cool because there's a little bit of a Venn diagram where we've got some entrepreneurial parts, we've got the EOS part, but then we have y'all working with entrepreneurs on EOS, right, to actually better their organization with right fit. What's just for closing thoughts from each of you, what's something that you think just in hiring? It doesn't have to be limited to the integrator, but in hiring within an EOS organization, what's something that just a tip you would each leave to someone who's running on EOS, they're hiring today, and they just want to make sure that they're getting the right people in the right seats? What's a tip you have?
I would say, and it's interesting you say tip because that's the name of our assessment. So
product placement.
Beautiful segue.
I do highly recommend that they use some sort of assessment tool. So the interview itself, when it comes to predicting success, is only 14% effective. But when you add an assessment tool, a quality assessment tool, that goes up to 53%. So I would definitely have them take an assessment. You never want to hire that person and then later say, that's not the person that interviewed with us, right? Because everyone interviews, or most people interview well. So that assessment is number one. Number two, visionaries, I would recommend really relying on the tools and your team to make that decision, because us visionaries, we hire based on emotion usually. We like that person a lot. John's heard me say that. I really like that person, right? And that is not a good recipe, right? If trust your gut when it tells you not to hire the person, but don't trust your gut when it says hire this person. You need a team. You need a couple people to help you. Use objective tools, and I always say, a typical interview. I saw this in a book on hiring, but a typical interview is a conversation between two liars, right? And so you have the candidate that's embellishing stuff, and then you have the visionary, like, come work for us. We're great. We're amazing. We got this awesome culture, and I really want you here. So they're sold on the position, they're sold on that person. So that's what I would recommend. Definitely use a tip, and if you could have an assessment that measures mental aptitudes, that is so important. They can have the best Colby, the best PI or CI, but you need to measure their mental aptitudes. Super important, especially in today's culture and with AI.
Very cool. John, what about you?
Yeah, I would say it kind of ties into that, and it just happens to be an EOS tool as well, but the GWC. And so the process that we use, the tools that we use, measures capacity, measures some of those things. But I think that is important. Do they get it? And it's not just do they get the role as it's defined. Hey, you're going to do task A, B, and C. But do they get the organization? Do they get the culture? Do they get the core values? Do they get all of those things? And our process digs into all of that. So as Alec mentioned earlier, our position profile that we put out there to attract candidates, and we use as kind of almost as a marketing tool to say, hey, this is the organization, and is this an organization you want to work with? And so figuring out do they get the organization, and then the other tools we use, the behavioral interview, the tip, talk a lot to the capacity part, and then the want it part. So obviously, if they're talking to you and you can decipher that through their discussions and their passion and their interest and around those kinds of things. So I think that's a great tool, and it fits in well with how we do what we do.
Well, that's awesome. Well, this has been a killer conversation. I think it's the depth that y'all go through into your process is really cool. And so if anyone's listening and you're interested in hiring and bringing on new team members, if you're looking for an integrator, you can find Alec or John. Is it visionspark.com?
Visionsparksearch.com.
Visionsparksearch.com, and we'll put that in the notes too. But great conversation. Greatly appreciate you both, and y'all have an awesome weekend.
All right,
Thank
you too.
Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie.
Cool.